Hi everyone, and welcome to Historic Reflection. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's find out who we are reflecting on today. Hello, dear guest. Can you tell us who you are?
Thank you kindly for the welcome. My name is Abraham Lincoln. I was born in the year 1809 in a small log cabin in Kentucky. And through the course of my life, I served many roles: a laborer, a rail splitter, a lawyer, and for a time the 16th President of the United States. But long before public office ever found me, I was a boy of the frontier, raised among fields and forests where a man's work was done with his hands and his character shaped by the land around him. It is a curious thing to sit here in your modern age, and I confess I look upon it with both wonder and humility. If you wish to speak of those earlier days or of the remarkable world you now inhabit, I shall do my best to answer plainly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our questions will be from your past, and we would also like to get your opinion on some modern questions as well. Just speak freely if you wish. Is that all right with you?
That arrangement suits me well enough. In my own day, I was often called upon to answer questions both fair and difficult, and I have always believed that honest inquiry deserves an honest reply. If your questions concern the days of my youth or the trials of my public life, I shall answer as plainly as I am able. And if you should ask of these modern wonders I now find myself among, I cannot promise the wisdom of a man born to them, but I can offer the reflections of one who once tried in his time to understand the world as best he could. Please proceed.
First question. How did your childhood experiences in Indiana and Kentucky specifically influence your political views on labor and opportunity?
The years of my youth in Kentucky and later in Indiana impressed upon me lessons that never quite left my mind. I was born into modest circumstances, and much of my early life was spent clearing land, splitting rails, and tending to the necessities of a frontier household. From such beginnings, a young man learns that labor is not a disgrace, but the natural condition of mankind. A man who works honestly with his hands to support himself and his family is no less worthy of respect than any gentleman of wealth. I also came to believe that a man ought to have the chance to rise by his own efforts. If he is allowed to learn, improve himself, and apply his industry wisely, he might better his condition. That belief remained with me throughout my life.
Growing up not having much, but as far as you knew, you had everything. I know that feeling well. When you value a man's work and effort, it gives you a view of people beyond their status, color, or luxuries. Would you say your upbringing had something to do with your belief that every man is equal?
I believe you have touched upon something very near the truth. When a man grows up among people who possess little beyond their labor and character, he soon learns that a person's worth cannot be measured by fine clothing or wealth. On the frontier, a neighbor's value was seen in his honesty and willingness to help when trouble came. Those experiences impressed upon me that dignity resides in the individual's soul, not in the station he occupies. That belief grew stronger over time and shaped many of my later views about liberty and opportunity.
Let us move into a bit of speculation. If you had not been assassinated, what would have been your biggest challenge in holding the nation together during Reconstruction?
The greatest challenge would have been balancing justice with reconciliation. The war had left bitterness on every side. It was necessary to ensure that freedom was protected for those newly freed, but it was also important not to treat the defeated South with excessive punishment that might deepen resentment. The task would have been to hold firmly to the principles for which the war had been fought, while encouraging a spirit of restoration rather than revenge.
I know you hunted and fished for food as a child and young man. What kinds of game did you hunt most often?
In the country where I was raised, hunting was a necessity more than a sport. We commonly hunted rabbits, squirrels, wild turkey, and sometimes deer when fortune allowed it. A deer was a great prize for a frontier family, though smaller game such as rabbit and squirrel were far more common. Fishing also provided many meals along the creeks and rivers. To a hungry frontier boy, any honest meal was welcome.
Today, hunting can be very different. Some hunters use drones with infrared cameras that can fly over the woods and locate animals by their body heat. You then simply travel to that location and complete the hunt.
That would indeed seem a marvel to the young fellow I once was. In my day, hunting required patience, observation, and knowledge of the land. Such technology might make the hunt easier, though I would hope that hunters still maintain respect for the land and the creatures they pursue.
Let's move to our closing segment. We call this the Rapid Five. What was the thought process behind the wording of the House Divided speech?
The phrase came from Scripture. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I wish the people to understand that the nation could not remain permanently divided between slavery and freedom.
How did winning the 1860 election without Southern electoral votes affect your approach to secession?
It revealed how deep the division had already grown. My hope was to reassure the South while preserving the Union through lawful means.
What was your reaction to the firing on Fort Sumter?
It made clear that the conflict had passed from debate into open rebellion. The Union had to defend itself.
Which advisor influenced you most regarding the Emancipation Proclamation?
Several offered counsel, though my Secretary of the Treasury, Salmon P. Chase, strongly supported the measure. In the end, the decision rested with me.
Why were border states excluded from the Emancipation Proclamation?
Because they had remained in the Union. Including them risked pushing them toward the Confederacy during the war.
What was your personal reaction to the loss of your son Willie while in the White House?
It was among the deepest sorrows of my life. The loss weighed heavily upon my wife and myself during an already difficult time.
It has been a pleasure, sir. We thank you for your time and your candor today.
The pleasure has been mine. I thank you and your audience for the courtesy of your questions. If anything from my life offers guidance, I hope it is that a nation remains strongest when its people treat one another with patience, fairness, and charity. For the work of preserving a free country passes from one generation to the next. Good evening to you all.
Well, everyone, what a fascinating reflection that was. Today we stepped back in time and spoke with a man who rose from humble beginnings in a frontier cabin to carry the enormous burden of leading a divided nation. From farm life and hunting in the wilderness to the difficult moral choices of leadership, we caught a glimpse of how a person's early experiences can shape the convictions that guide them through history. But that is exactly what historic reflection is about. This series isn't about recreating the past. It's about reflecting on the ideas, struggles, and wisdom of history, and asking what those voices might say if they could sit down with us today. Every episode, we will welcome a new guest from another time and explore their world, their beliefs, and their thoughts on the modern age. And next time, we'll be reflecting with a man whose mind saw electricity in ways the world had never imagined. A thinker who believed energy could travel through the air itself, and whose ideas helped shape the modern technological world we live in today. But we'll let him introduce himself. Until then, thank you for joining us here on Historic Reflection. And remember, history may be behind us, but its reflections are still speaking. Good night.